I have written 25,000 lines of code to build an entire online character creation tool so you could create a character in less than 10 minutes. You're still probably going to take 4 hours to get through character creation, but it's not gonna be my fault. Welcome back to Flair for February, a series of videos where I talk about the tabletop RPG I've been working on for the past couple of years. And today, I want to get you through the character creation process. When you click on the Create New Character button, the Flair 4 website gives you a choice. You can use one of the pre-generated characters, which you can then customize if you want to, or you can create a character from scratch, which is what we're going to do in this video. This creates a new character sheet with a character creator tool. You can close the character creator at any point. If you want to open it again, you just need to click the cogwheel icon on your character sheet. The first page of the character creator is a reminder to read through the setting primer and the rules primer. Each of those is just 1 page long, and if you're a player, they're probably the only thing you actually need to read to get started. Then it's time to come up with a concept for your character. You can keep that for later if you want and move on to the rest of the character creator, but personally I like doing that first. This page includes things like your name, how old you are, some personality traits, etc. You can type things yourself or click the randomize button to get a random suggestion. What is probably the most important choice at that point is your age. This is a post-apocalyptic setting, but the apocalypse in question is pretty recent. It only happened 20 years ago, which means depending on your character's age, your character can range from a young rebel who's only ever known the wasteland, all the way to an old senile geezer with great-grandchildren who remembers a time when you didn't even have space elevators yet. So the character creation tool tries to show you what your age might mean by showing you how old you were when the flare happened and a small text blurb to give you some context. Besides that, you've got goals, quirks, personality traits, and a reason why you go on adventure with the rest of the player characters. This entire section is mostly here just to help you come up with a character who will be fun both for you and for the other players of the table. After that, it's time to decide on your attributes. Like I mentioned in yesterday's video, every character has 5 attributes: grit, speed, technique, presence, and luck. Each of them can go from 0 to 5, and a score of 2 is considered average. When you create your character, you have a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4, and you can allocate them however you want, which means your character is going to have 2 attributes where they are above average and 2 attributes where they are below average. Make sure you check out the tooltips for each attribute, because each attribute comes with a list of suggestions for qualities and flaws that you might find in characters for whom that attribute is their highest attribute, and then a second set of qualities and flaws for characters for whom that attribute is their lowest attribute. For example, if your highest attribute is grit and your lowest is presence, the tooltip for grit suggests that maybe your character is reliable and confident, but maybe reckless and boastful, while the tooltip for presence says that maybe your character is humble or loyal, but also a bit reserved or rude. Those tables can really help you flesh out your character and their personality. One very important thing is that in Flair 4, some of the actions you can take in and out of combat have an attribute threshold. You can still use those actions even if you don't meet the threshold. After all, this is a tabletop RPG, so it's very improvisational. And one thing that can happen is that a player accidentally ends up describing an action that they don't meet the threshold for without realizing. But if you try to do that, you'll have to make a medium difficulty check using that attribute that, by definition, you're not very good at. And if you fail, the action is wasted. So depending on what your 2 highest attributes are, the list of actions that you'll have access to during combat will look completely different from one character to the next, and those characters will feel completely different to play. There's 4 actions which don't have a threshold: move, attack, use an object, and improvise. But let's say you put your 4 in presence and your 3 in technique. That means on top of those 4 universal actions, you'll get 4 extra actions that you don't need to roll to use: assist and distract from having a high presence, and aim and call shots from having a high technique. So the game has about 20 different actions, but as a player, you probably only need to learn how about 6 to 8 of them work. Those are the only actions that appear, at least by default, on your character sheet. The first attribute is grit, which is your character's physical strength and resilience. Having a high grit increases your maximum hit points, which are equal to 3 plus your grit. And on top of that, whenever you make a melee attack, you add your grit to the damage. The actions tied to grit are all focused on tanking. If you have a high grit, you can taunt enemies so they attack you rather than your allies. You can grapple them, brace for when you expect a strong hit coming your way, or even take an attack for one of your allies using the intercept reaction. The second attribute is speed, but it's probably going to be renamed someday when I find a better name for it. Speed governs how many actions you can take during combat. Your maximum action points are equal to 10 plus your speed, and most actions cost between 3 and 6 action points. But it's also the attribute of sneakery. If you need to hide, if you need to pickpocket someone, it's probably going to involve a speed check. Then we've got technique, and it's the stat for nerds who know a lot of things and want to make sure that you know that they know a lot of things. Characters with a high technique usually focus on debuffing their enemies and interacting with the environment. In combat, they get the cold shot action. Normally, attacks in this game always hit, you just roll damage. But if you do a cold shot, you can choose to make a technique roll and risk missing your attack entirely. But if you succeed, on top of dealing damage, you inflict some negative status condition on the target, which depends on what you aimed at: the leg, the arm, the head. And if you have a very high technique, you can even get the hack action. If there are electronic devices around like security cameras, automated doors, turrets, etc., then a character with a high technique can control the battlefield and turn the enemy's defenses against them. And after that, we have presence, and it's the stat for cool kids who know a lot of people and want to make sure that you know that they know a lot of people. It's a very useful stat out of combat, on the account that Flarefall is a role-playing game, which means talking with people is a thing that you need to do every now and then. But during combat, characters with a high presence are very good supports. They can distract enemies to give their allies advantage on attacks against that enemy, or use the assist action where they give some of their action points to an ally. And finally, there is luck. As I explained in yesterday's video, luck is very important in Flarefall because of the push your luck mechanic, which allows you to potentially turn any failed roll into a successful one if you're lucky. Now, you can use the improvised action to make luck rolls, and those are often the most fun times you can have in this game, but there's also one extra luck-based action: lucky shots. When you make a lucky shot, you make a contested luck roll against your opponent, and whoever fails has to roll on the mishap table and suffer the associated effect. So once again, the luck attribute is for people who like high risk, high reward type of gameplay. After you're happy with your attributes, it's time to pick some abilities. Abilities are divided into skills and perks. Skills are non-combat abilities and perks are combat abilities, and at level 1 you get 3 of each. You can also choose to start at level 0, which means you skip this step entirely. If you just want to do a board game night with 0 prep and 0 commitment, this is a good way to make character creation even shorter than it already is, so you can get to the part where you're actually playing the game as soon as possible. Abilities are split into ability trees, which are the closest thing this game has to classes. You've got skill trees like the Keyboard Warrior, which specializes in hacking, or Urban Adventure, which specializes in exploration. And then you've got perk trees like Juggernaut, which specializes in tanking, or Doc, which specializes in healing items. The trees themselves are divided into 5 tiers, each with 1 or 2 abilities. To unlock an ability, you need to have at least 1 ability from the same tree and from the previous tier, unless the ability you're trying to get is already tier 1. Tiers also have a level requirement. At level 1, you can pick abilities from tiers 1 and 2, but then you unlock 1 new tier every 2 levels. Tier 3 at level 3, tier 4 at level 5, and tier 5 at level 7. That might sound a bit complicated, but don't worry, the character creation tool will guide you through all of it. And on top of that, the list of ability trees are automatically sorted based on what your highest attributes are. So for example, if you have a high grit, the first skill tree you're going to see in the list is the muscle. But if I go back and make the highest attribute for this character presence, then now the first skill tree in the list is trader. So you probably don't even have to go through the entire list. The first few trees will probably be the best matches for your character anyway. Now, normally each ability costs 1 skill point or 1 perk point, but there is an exception. In the generic perks tree, which always appears at the top, there are 5 perks which are called flaws. Each flaw reduces one of your attributes by 1 and comes with an extra negative effect. For example, there is the stinky flaw, which reduces your presence by 1, and on top of that, allies within 1 meter of you have disadvantage on all rolls. But in exchange, instead of costing you 1 perk point, taking this flaw gives you 1 extra perk point. You can only have up to 1 flaw, but I know there's a lot of players out there who will have a lot of fun with these. Now, whenever you gain a level, you gain 1 extra perk point and 1 extra skill point. But the way you level up is by finding a nano chip, which is some kind of futuristic USB stick that you can plug directly into your brain, and that instantly teaches you everything that's on that nano chip. A bit like in the Matrix or Cyberpunk. But the important thing is that whenever you get a nano chip, the plot twister can choose up to 3 skills and 3 perks that do not appear in any of the ability trees, and those are extra options for you to pick from just for that level up. And typically the plot twister will choose these unique options based on the adventures that you've had and the choices that you've made. So don't bother coming up with a character build where you plan out every single perk that you're gonna get from level 1 all the way to level 10. In this game, sometimes as the story unfolds, you might just want to let it affect your character and the plans you might have had for the future. And finally, it's time to pick your starting equipment. This part is honestly the least interesting for now, but I have been working on overhauling the entire weapon system, so that's probably going to change in the near future. So for now at least, you just pick 1 weapon of your choice and then you have up to 30 chips. That's the game's currency to spend on anything else. And of course, the character creation tool offers a selection of a few starting packs, where if you sum up the value of all the items in that pack, they're always worth 30 chips. Once you have your starting equipment, congratulations, you have finished building your character, and you have completed your character sheet. But there's still one more step that you might want to go through: adding your character to a campaign by clicking on the flag icon underneath their portrait. To do that, you're going to need an invite code. If you're the plot twister, the way you get your invite code is by creating a new campaign and scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the page. Once the character sheet has been added to the campaign, a couple things happen. First, every player in that campaign, as well as the plot twister, are now in the same chat room, which means that when you click on one of your attacks on your character sheet, everyone sees that roll in real time. Then you also gain access to the shared party inventory, where you can take items from it or put items into it. And finally, on the plot twister screen, there is an initiative tracker with all of the characters in the campaign. And if you want to, as the plot twister, you can share this initiative tracker with your players so everyone sees it in real time. And that way your players have no excuse when it's their turn and they still don't know what they want to do. And yeah, that's it. You've got a fully fledged character and a fully functional character sheet. And for those of you who prefer pen and paper, I haven't forgotten about you, don't worry. I have commissioned a black and white printable character sheet, but it's not quite ready yet. It's coming very soon. But make sure you stick around by joining my Discord server or watching the playlist with every one of those videos, because tomorrow we'll be talking about how combat works in Flarefall. Okay, bye!